I'm Brian Curtis.
And I'm Wendy Ring. Welcome to Cool Solutions, stories of climate action from the bottom up. In the last couple of episodes, we've been looking at farm animals and climate, from what comes out of them to what goes into us, or didn't during last month's vegan challenge.
But we still haven't looked at change from the farmer's perspective and how to bring about a rapid and just agricultural transformation.
When it comes to meat, we're talking about turning a very big ship. Over 99% of chickens and turkeys, 98% of pigs, and 70% of cows in the U.S. are raised in concentrated animal feeding operations, and nearly 70% of our crops go to feed them.
With the majority of this production controlled by a few large companies, that's not just bad for the planet and for animals, it's also bad for farmers.
You're an indentured servant.
Serf with a mortgage, very similar to the old coal mine company store where they keep you in debt so they can control you.
That's how North Carolina farmers Paula Bowles and Craig Watts describe growing livestock for integrators. Companies like Smithfield, Perdue, and Tyson, which are vertically integrated, meaning they provide the animals, feed, medications, veterinary care, transport, processing, and distribution.
These companies don't raise the animals. For that, they contract with family farmers. The farmers provide the land, the facilities, and the labor, but have little control over the process or outcome.
To get a contract, farmers take out big loans to build industrial hog and chicken houses. But the contracts are short and the debt is long, and they often have to keep borrowing to make upgrades the integrators require for contract renewal. Once a farmer enters this cycle of debt, it's very hard to get out.
One way you get out of it is die, and that's very blunt, but that's just the truth. I know a guy who's been farming chickens and he's 80 years old and been doing it his whole life and still owes money. That's just crazy. The other is Chapter 12 bankruptcy. And then the other is just lose everything you got.
That's almost what happened to Paula and Dale Bowles, who grew contract chickens for 13 years on their farm in Granite Falls, North Carolina.
They made us a great offer, made it sound like it would be hard work for a few years, but eventually it would be a great retirement income for us. So we went in debt about $300,000 and built 2 chicken houses. Tyson required us to upgrade a few things, even though the houses were only a few years old. So next thing we knew, we were in debt $400,000. And then they decided that they wanted to change the fans that were in the house. So that was about another $30,000 or $40,000 upgrade.
Farming is inherently risky, but in this system, farmers bear more than their share.
You only get paid for whatever birds make it live to the processing plant. So if it's in the middle of the summer and 2,000 of them die because they smother to death, you lose all that. You don't get paid for what leaves your farm. You get paid for what makes it live to the processing plant. If they have an issue at the feed mill and they can't get the feed out to you in time and your birds go without feed, you'll have some that'll start to die. There's so many things that are totally out of your control.
The price of meat may be rising, but it's integrators and their shareholders who are pocketing the profit.
In 2010, 70% of farmers whose sole income came from poultry were living below poverty level.
The poultry farmer makes 5 cents a pound. After everything is processed, they automatically send the payment to the bank, and then whatever is left, they send to you to pay your expenses. It got to the point that we couldn't meet the farm bills from the farm check.
Mike Weaver is the founder and president of the Contract Poultry Growers Association of the Virginias. A former contract grower of chickens for Pilgrim's Pride, he says the Bowles experience is typical.
People wonder, why would somebody get involved in a situation like that? And part of the reason is they lie terribly to people about the amount of revenue that a poultry rearing facility will generate. I got a copy of one prospectus they put out to get people to build new rearing facilities for them, and they clearly indicated that they would net about $60,000 to $80,000 a year per house more than I ever did. That's a lie.
Once in debt, the farmers are vulnerable.
Most of them, like me, put their home and their farm in the hock. It's either take what the companies give you or lose your home and your farm. The companies know that, and they abuse that.
Like this thing called the tournament system.
Everybody whose birds that are processed for that week has to compete against each other for their pay. And the real travesty about it is that it's a rigged lottery competing against each other based on the inputs from the company, which you have no control over. If you get good chicks or you get good feed, or both, hopefully, you're going to make good on your chickens. But if you don't, you can't possibly make a good chicken out of it.
That competition keeps farmers divided.
Tyson made us feel like we were the only ones having the problem, that we were the failures, that everybody else was doing fine, that it was just us. And, when you don't have other people to turn, you kind of believe what they tell you.
In addition to financial pressures, there are other sources of stress. The companies dictate to farmers how to raise their animals, and the conditions are far from humane.
Paula was so disturbed by the condition of chickens on her farm that she would no longer consume her own product.
A lot of them die of heart attacks. It's like they'll just stiffen up and all of a sudden they fall backwards. And it's because when they go to market, they're only 49 days old. That is a baby chicken. Their organs are really small, but they have these huge breasts. That's the way they want to grow them because the meat is still tender, but it's huge. So basically, those little chickens are obese. I mean, that's what they do to them. And their hearts can't deal with that. There's just no way that you can naturally grow a chicken that big, that quick, if you're not pumping it full of steroids and hormones and everything else. I don't care what they say. I do eat chicken, but I don't buy Tyson just because I know that firsthand.
Farmers are forced to violate their own values as stewards.
When you're $1 million in debt, you're very pliable and you'll do things to not cause waves, that you'll just do it. I saw this Perdue commercial and they walk in this chicken house and it's totally pristine. Feed pans look like you wiped them down with Armor All, brand new pine shavings with market age birds, which is absolutely impossible. And the birds had like a half an acre apiece to roam around in. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is not what I see every day. You get stuff on labels like cage free. Well, they crammed the chickens so tight in the houses, you couldn't get a cage in there if you wanted to.
He blew the whistle.
We put a little 5-minute YouTube video together. New York Times picked it up. It got up on the Reddit board. It got several million views. I expect them to fire me.
When growers speak out, retaliation is common.
Growers getting their contracts pulled.
They can send you bad chicks or bad feed.
Meanwhile, Paula and her husband Dale were reaching the end of their rope.
Instead of reaping income, they were working off-farm jobs just to subsidize the chicken operation.
I would get up about 4 o'clock in the morning, go through the houses and check everything, then get the kids up and go to the office. And then he would get off work 3 or 4 o'clock and he would go down there and be down there till late at night. I had even cashed in my 401k. We'd gotten so far behind in our mortgage payments that they were looking at foreclosing our home. We woke up one day and realized that we were headed towards bankruptcy. We had to do something else.
Finally, she called Farm Aid's crisis hotline and discovered she was not alone.
They put me in touch with a few other people that had gone bankrupt from contract growing. I had people crying on the phone telling me how they had lost the family land. And I mean, this was just multiple people.
Figuring they had little to lose, the Bulls canceled their contract with Tyson.
The day they came out and picked up their $20 sign and drove off, we just stood there on the land thinking we invested our lives. We invested $400,000 and Tyson really had nothing invested in us.
With assistance from North Carolina's Tobacco Trust Fund, Paula and her husband turned one of their chicken houses into a greenhouse, and they now sell flowers and vegetables. Financially, it was a good move.
Once you walk away, it's not like you're really giving up a big income because you haven't had an income.
Expenses are down.
Our propane bill used to run about $25,000 a year. And in the summer, I would have electric bills averaging around $2,000 a month. Now with the greenhouse propane, bills less than $100. And I think the highest electric bill I've ever had is about $150. We've pretty much been able to get out of debt. We've kept our home. We've kept the land. We have a little bit of cash flow. There may not be a lot of money in the bank account, but there's a lot to be said for feeling good about what you do at the end of the day and know that you've done it well. None of us take any of that with us. The land doesn't belong to us. We may have our name on the deed, but ultimately we don't own any of it. But just to be good stewards of what we have and to know that we're taking care of it, that just has given us a satisfaction. I mean, you still have to pay the bills, but there's just been so much pleasure in being able to do that and having people come out to the farm and buy produce from you, buy flowers. That really gives you a sense of pride.
Paula says asking for help is the best thing she could have done.
It's hard to go out there and tell everybody that you're failing. We have a tendency sometimes to not want to tell people how bad things are. But once we got out there and Craig got out there and a few other people, all of a sudden everybody started saying, well, hey, that's where we are. So I definitely think it's a movement helping farmers realize that they do have a choice. They don't have to live like an indentured servant the rest of their lives.
Matt Watson is another one that got away. He's a former contract turkey grower in Chester, South Carolina. While integrators say contract farming decreases the risk for farmers, Matt came to believe the opposite was true.
The birds were heavily medicated, real susceptible to disease. One of the biggest concerns is bird flu. Wild bird flies over and poops on our driveway, then we step in the turkey barns and all of a sudden our birds are sick. Ducks or geese simply flying over the farm was a huge threat to our livelihood. It also becomes a draw on the land, the resources. We had 30,000 turkeys on the place, and they would use somewhere around 20,000 gallons in one day of water. We felt like it was becoming more of a liability than an asset. We needed to be developing another way for us to stay on the farm. It took us realizing that it can be done, showing ourselves, getting started. We started with the grass-fed beef and slowly added the pork, chicken, and eggs, all of which we raise on pasture. We didn't try to just quit the turkeys one day and then start the grass-fed enterprise the next day. We had layer chickens on the farm at the same time that we had the contract birds. That was breaking the rules, but it was something we had to do to be able to make sure that when we were ready that we could transition out of the turkeys. And that's the big problem, is the integrators have such a stranglehold over the farmer that it's incredibly difficult for farmers to not only get out of the debt, but to build any other enterprises on their farm because of the rules that the integrator makes them follow.
The pandemic provided the final boost they needed to shut the turkey houses down.
When the pandemic came along, consumers were beating down our door for our meats.
Their customer base continues to grow.
We serve 4 different metropolitan markets. Folks go on our website, and if their zip code matches the database that we serve, then we deliver to their door.
Bird flu is no longer a big threat.
We have about 3,000 laying hens on pasture. They're out there mingling with the wild birds all the time, and there's never any problem.
Now Matt's problem is finding enough people to fill the jobs he's creating. And as the biggest customer of the small local processing plant, they're growing the local economy as well. Having a nearby processor that serves independent farmers is key to his success. But even with access to processing, it took nearly 20 years and a pandemic for Matt's farm to break free from contract growing. And he's still in debt.
We've got debt on the land still. We've got debt on what was the turkey business. So sometimes it doesn't feel like we have the net income that we should, but we're optimistic that it will far outperform what the turkeys were ever going to be able to do.
It takes money to make a new start. Matt was able to get a loan despite being in debt.
The banks do like contract poultry. I know that because the cash flow is usually there. There's just not much of that cash flow left over for the farmer. I think it comes down to the relationship you have with your bank, your track record. That helps a lot. And the more farms that end up doing this type of agriculture, the more that these traditional banks should be able to see that, hey, there is a market here. It can work.
You could look at Paula and Matt's stories as one-offs. Successful exits from contract farming are rare. But these stories not only give us hope that it can be done, they also highlight the systemic change we need. The Biden administration promised to address the power imbalance between farmers and integrators with antitrust enforcement, preventing retaliation, and reforming the tournament system. But Mike Weaver at the Contract Growers Association is pessimistic.
There were similar changes in the regulations proposed under the Obama administration back in 2010, and I and our association and a whole lot of growers across the country put a tremendous amount of time and effort and investment into trying to promote that and make sure it happened, and it never did.
Tom Vilsack, the current Secretary of Agriculture, was also the Secretary of Agriculture under Obama.
He and the president both could have, with the stroke of a pen, implemented those, and it would have been changed then, but neither one of them did it. The giant corporations, poultry companies, and or meat processors have too many congressmen and senators in their back pockets. I started lobbying for farmers going on 20 years ago now on Capitol Hill. When I first started going down there, they kept it pretty quiet. The fact that they were taking payola from these giant corporations. But in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it's gotten so blatant that they don't even care if you know that they're doing it. You can ask my wife. I've come home many times from being in Washington and told her that I need to get in the shower and wash the slime off of me.
With little faith in their power to overcome Big Ag's influence in Washington, livestock farmers are creating their own solutions from the bottom up. In contrast to the industry's divide and conquer tactics, they build power by coming together. Grassroots Farmers Cooperative is a cooperative of around 50 small family farms, founded by Cody Hopkins, a first-generation farmer in Arkansas. He started out selling his pastured beef, poultry, and hogs to neighbors, local restaurants, and farmers markets.
But consolidation in the meat industry had destroyed the small distribution networks that would support their growth beyond that point.
As Cody puts it, there's no ag in the middle.
It doesn't really exist. It's either like super tiny, someone selling at a farmer's market, and then you've got the four big meat companies, right? And so some sort of ag in the middle needs to exist to give farmers a scale that actually works. Profit has a place, it's got to be there, but it also has to be weighted with the social impact, the environmental impact, and the animal welfare impact. And scale is important to consider, especially as it relates to what the land can hold, what works well for the land. You don't want to get so big that you degrade it. Equally as important is considering all the stakeholders versus the folks at the top of the business. We saw an opportunity to create a farmers co-op where we could try to tackle those things together.
So what makes it different from a company like Tyson?
Tyson is owned by shareholders, whereas we're owned by farmers. So farmers are in control of this business. Our goal at the end of the day is to make sure we're putting as many dollars as possible back into our farmers' hands and the rural communities we work in, and the processing partners we're working with are working to pay their employees better. We're actually working on a process right now to give processing employees ownership in those businesses. And so trying to create sort of a multi-stakeholder ownership model, it's a very different sort of mindset. And one's really focused on profit maximization at the top of the business, and the other values a lot more things in that. How we treat the animals, how we treat the environment, how we treat the suppliers and the employees in these businesses versus how we treating the stockholders.
Pasture-based production has a lower cost of entry.
Compared to a chicken house, which might cost $250,000, we have much lower cost infrastructure. And so the farmers are able to realize profitability a lot sooner, and it takes a lot less capital to get off the ground. And then they're also getting paid a much bigger chunk. On average, in the industrial ag system, about 14 cents of every dollar goes back to the farmer, and we're giving closer to 50 or 60 cents of every dollar.
Compare that to what Tyson is paying.
75 cents to $1 a pound versus 6 cents a pound.
At that rate, farmers don't need 100,000 chickens to earn a living.
Our model is very focused on making sure we don't overload the land. Our farms might raise 10, 20,000 birds a year, which can give them a decent income. Nobody gets rich in farming, but they can make a decent, good income for that.
To get those premium prices, cooperative members must meet certain standards.
All of our farmers are required to use practices that actually increase the biodiversity on the land, improve the quality of the soil. They must move their chickens to fresh pasture every day. And we have a couple of folks on staff that provide support to the farmers, help them improve their production practices, and also make sure that those promises that we have to the customer, the farmers are following those. And the farmers understand that if they don't follow those practices, that they won't have that dependable market that is willing to pay a premium for their products.
Working together has numerous advantages.
At the founding of the co-op, something that really galvanized us, we had a customer approach one of our farmers, and that farmer couldn't provide that customer with the amount of chickens they needed. And so as a group, we were able to work together to supply that customer.
The co-op negotiates better prices for things like chicks and feed. They've also worked together to increase processing capacity.
We developed an amazing partnership with a nonprofit based out of Arkansas called Heifer International. For folks who don't know about Heifer, They've historically been known for the work they do internationally. They've always had a U.S. program. They have taken a real interest in the work that we're doing and have been a real key partner and have helped us find ways to get access to capital, whether it be grants or loans. We wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for that partnership.
Heifer helped the cooperative get the financing for a 50-50 partnership with a small independent meat processor.
That made the processing company feel comfortable, gave it the security it needed to be able to expand its operations to accommodate our farmers. That was a really pivotal point for our co-op. I don't think we would have made it this far. I know we wouldn't have made it this far if we wouldn't have found that partnership. We launched a joint venture that does poultry processing. At the time, I think there may have been 10 or 12 small USDA certified poultry processing plants in the entire country that would service independent farmers. Those companies that we are partners with, they do process for more farms than just grassroots farms. One of the processors processes for almost 1,000 farms. And so we can have a really big impact on a community to have that kind of processing in place. I do think that it does take different kinds of creative financing to support a different model like we're trying to create here.
The cooperative's farmers are seeing benefits on their land.
Most of our farms are raising multiple species. There's a lot of symbiotic relationships that exist on a farm that's diversified versus monocrop. And we've seen the quality of the pastures improving and diversity improving in the pastures. Having diversified farm operations helps really contribute to healing and improving of the land while also giving farmers other income streams too. One thing that we measure is the improvement in the organic matter in the soil. If you can increase an acre of soil's organic matter from, say, 3% to 4%, that 1 percentage point increase will increase that acre's water holding capacity by 15 to 20,000 gallons. We've seen farms improve from 1.5% up to 3.5 or 4%. When it rains, you're able to capture more of that. You get less runoff. Your grasses grow a little bit longer. They develop deeper roots.
That increases the resilience to climate impacts affecting Arkansas farmers.
We get quite a bit of rain on average here in Arkansas. It's just that the average is not typically what you see anymore. It's really extremes, the rainstorms that are more intense than they used to be, or the droughts that last longer.
I was surprised to learn that putting chickens on pasture doesn't save much on feed compared to industrial poultry.
Those chickens have maybe a square foot of space, so they don't really move much. Our chickens are out running around, getting a lot more exercise. They get somewhere between 10 and 20% of their diet out of the pasture. Farmers aren't saving a bunch of money on feed because they're out on pasture. It's the quality of the product that shines because of that. That 10, 20% of forage they get, whether it's clover, grasses, grasshoppers and crickets and all that, that makes a major difference in the flavor profile and the end quality of the meat. We've had our meat tested actually, and vitamin levels are higher, the fatty acid profiles are better.
Consumers get a better product.
And they can feel good about supporting farmers who are building a better food system. What's limiting farmers from joining this movement are those huge expensive confinement barns that become white elephants if they quit.
We no longer have the option as a species to continue operating in a disposable economy. We have to repurpose things.
That's Tyler Whitley, director of Mercy for Animals Transformation Project.
From a farm perspective, farmers don't have the money to just keep scrapping stuff and buying things new. They just don't. They're not making enough money. The margins aren't there to be able to just bulldoze a multi-million-dollar investment and start over new. So we're trying to find something that can hold value beyond having that relationship with the integrator.
Transformation is looking at ways to convert those expensive CAFO facilities to grow plants instead.
It's not something that has widely been done before, so accessing capital and accessing the technical know-how on how to do that conversion, those aren't things that are readily available. We contract with a lot of regional technical experts in raising crops and greenhouse conversion. We've had so many farmers contact us that we actually don't advertise, and we don't need to do any outreach.
Out of 200 farmers who've reached out to them, they're starting small with a cohort of 10. Craig Watts is one of them. He's currently working off the farm with the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project to stem the spread of CAFOs in his region. Transformation is helping him get back to farming with a project to grow mushrooms in shipping containers.
I'm going to put that inside my chicken house and use the insulation from the chicken house to help with climate control. I've seen it done. Works perfect.
Craig has no regrets about emptying those chicken houses.
When I wake up in the morning, I look forward to the day. I'm not going down, grinding out days, trying to pay off debt, having my intelligence sorted on a weekly basis. Everything is just so much better on the outside looking in than it was on the inside looking out.
Cody, Matt, and Craig all believe strongly that consumers acting in solidarity with farmers can speed up the transition to a more just and sustainable food system.
We're operating in a food system where the meat part of it especially is controlled by just a handful of companies. I mean, it's a oligarchy. They have really powerful lobbyists. So the deck is really stacked against us here. I think our model is exciting, but it hinges on customers valuing what we're doing. As long as there's enough customers out there for this kind of product, farmer collectives working together can really, really be powerful. A model like this, I think, can really help build a meat system that has a lot more integrity. It'll be more expensive than what you pay in the grocery store in most cases, but the reality is that meat should cost a bit more than it does. And in a lot of cases, it's subsidized by the government, and that's why it's kept cheap. At the end of the day, what drives all of this is customers voting with their forks. We're hopeful, and we definitely are working our hardest to try to figure out a way to build a new system that can work for farmers too.
We've just scratched the surface in how many people are actually tapping into this kind of agriculture. So I think we would see big changes if everybody who could buy it would buy it.
One thing I think we're going to have to do, and I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan, but I think at the end of the day, we're all going to have to consume less meat. We should be looking for a higher welfare standard meat instead of this industrial stuff. I mean, if you want to eat chicken 3 times a day, yeah, this is a system to use, but it's not sustainable. Land is finite. We can't keep doing this.
Obviously, if you have local regenerative farmers, your best choice is to buy from them. Grassroots and Matt's Watson Farm meats are both sold online and shipped by air. And as someone who avoids air travel for climate reasons, I'm not sure I want my bacon flying either. Grassroots does purchase carbon offsets and uses compostable and biodegradable packaging. Buying from the grocery store and want to know which products really are humane?
ASPCA has on their website shopping with a heart, where you can go buy better products, because really we should be supporting what we believe in.
I'm Brian Curtis.
I'm Wendy Ring. Thanks for joining us for Cool Solutions, stories of climate action from the bottom up. For more cool solutions, check out our podcast.
Thanks to our guests Paula Bowles, Craig Watts, Mike Weaver, Cody Hopkins, and Tyler Whitley.
And to Scott Holmes, Marissa Anderson, and One Man Book for our music.